Why don't you tell us about the Dust Bowl dust storms in what, 30, 33, 34, somewhere in there?
Well, we were living down around Argonia.
Did we have dust storms in Argonia? I don't remember that. I remember in Gardner, but I don't remember in Argonia.
You don't remember in Argonia? We would hang wet sheets every Friday when I would clean. Invariably, Saturday, we would have a dust storm. So I would wet sheets and put them up at the door and over a window if I had a window in order to have the air. And you would sit out in the dust of the street as a little boy playing in the dust.
So, what, did I warn you about the dust storms coming, or?
No,
I didn't.
The wind warned me.
I see. So, why do you think it was happening Saturdays?
Because I cleaned on Fridays, and then invariably it would have a dust storm. I remember that.
My father was a coach there in Gardner, right? And then he came back as superintendent of schools. What activities did he achieve, or what deeds or feats did he achieve that come to your mind that were impressive?
Well, he had been a coach there before we were married, and he was called back this time as superintendent of schools. And at that time, I believe, what were you?
Oh, I was 3 or 4 years old.
Yes, and we had, we were very welcome back there because Tim had been popular as a coach. So we came back as superintendent and settled there for a while, feeling that we were among friends because we had returned to friends.
Well, I think he, in Oswego, there was a segregated school system. The blacks had a colored grade school, and the whites had a grade school, and then there were very few blacks were in the high school. But he allowed the blacks to play on the athletic teams, and they could come to the dances and be a part of student life. And I think he probably did more for the cause of integration in Oswego. This had to be 1940, 41, than anybody else. And that took some moral courage. Dad always talked about your having the first electric car. And when was that?
That was my grandparents.
Oh, they had an electric car.
They had an electric car.
And you got to drive it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And it was just a little two-seater.
So you really, were you the oldest grandchild in that family?
That's right.
Oh, so you were spoiled rotten from then.
That's right.
Oh, okay. When you went to California on your honeymoon, did you stay at cabin camps or did you stay in tents?
I know when we slept, when we went to cabin camps is when we went out with our 2 little sons to have Tim go.
That was in 1939.
That's right.
So on your honeymoon in 1927,
we went to.
Did you stay in cabin camps then?
Well, no, I think we had just tents mostly.
Yeah.
In a tent.
Were there any cabin camps in those days, in 1927?
Yes, a few, but we were kind of going on a very small amount of money.
Yeah.
And we could pitch your tent. Besides, we were younger there than then.
Right. What, is that where you had to back up the hill in the Model T, or was that earlier?
No, the Model T is when we backed up the hill on our trip to California.
So you really had to turn the car around and back up so the gasoline would feed into the carburetor. Okay. What, anyway, Uncle Bud's breakfasts were really huge. He had a dry cereal, and then he had a hot cereal, and then he had bacon and eggs or pancakes or something like that, and I was always amazed at how much food he ate for breakfast. But anyway, so he took over that ranch then when Grandfather Powers lost it. He took it over and was a tenant on that land.
Well, there was a tenant, and then Bud, my brother,
Yeah.
took over it, and then he gradually sold it. See, they shipped in cattle. It
Yeah.
became a good ranch place.
Right.
So they shipped cattle from Texas,
Right.
and these men down in Texas would contact, and they would ship them in by freight.
Right.
Sometimes they would drive them.
Right.
And then when they had fattened on the
Grass.
green,
Yeah.
the alfalfa and all, then they would drive them to market. And very often the market was in Kansas City, and they would load them, drive them into Dwight or
Yeah.
Junction City,
Yeah.
and load them on these cars,
Right.
and hop the train and go down and sell them.
The house where they lived in the ranch had very thick walls. Who built the house? And why were they so thick? Was it because of the heat or some other reason?
That's right. If they would have it 6 or 7 or 8 inches thick, it kept the heat out, and in the winter it made it warmer for them. And this ranch is sitting up on the rise,
Yeah, I remember that.
and therefore they got all the wind.
Yeah. Who built that house?
Some German man came to Fort Riley,
Yeah.
and Fort Riley was closed, so he decided that he would come there and have. They would have beer. The walls were thick, and they had a cave, and they could do it
In this house?
just below the house, part of the house.
Yeah, I sort of remember a cellar underneath.
That's right. And you see, this is on rocky soil, so they
Right.
could get their rock right there
Right.
and farm the land, and eventually get the land worked into a good soil so it made a better wheat and alfalfa.
Right.
But
Or were they
most-
going to grow their own malt and hops and all that to make this beer?
I don't know, because it was when Fort Riley was a real long time before the farms were developed there. It was
Yeah.
on the rocky soil.
Right. But anyway, you mentioned beer and the fact that
They had a cave, you see, that they could make the beer and put it in the cave. But then gradually it meant more to farming and the grazing of cattle.
Right.
And therefore it became a ranch instead of just a farm.
Oh, okay. But anyway, and I sort of recall now that you trigger it, that they had sort of a courtyard, that the house was sort of in the shape of an L, or a kitchen was off to one side.
Yes, and it sat on the rise, you know.
Yeah, but then down, as you walked out the door of the kitchen to the left, was some sort of spring house, or what was there?
Well, it was, instead of being a cave, it was a rock place that they could store their...
So it was just a storage,
That's right.
a cool storage place.
And this was mostly a ranch type thing, which meant mostly hilly, with some ground for wheat and alfalfa.
Yeah, I understand. I'm talking about the house, which I thought was rather unusual as a kid. Have you heard from any of your students in Mount Hope or Lewisburg?
Yes, later when I taught at Lewisburg, I had these, again, there was a home, these athletes had to have so many hours. So they put them in what they thought would be a very easy course of home living, in which we had some of the girls and some of the boys. And they decided these big athletes decided that they would show me. They would not study. They didn't have to do it. They had to be on the football field so they could buy me by that idea that they had to be out for the athletes. So I said, well, that's not the way it's going to be. You will prepare your lesson just as much as anybody else. But I will try to make it attractive. So we gave them simple things to sew that they could maybe give their sister, like a little apron or stitching up different things. And then they said, well, they didn't mind the sewing because they had been used to oiling the thrashing machines on the farms, so they loved to do the oiling of the sewing machines.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they loved foods because they could eat it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end, they kept saying that I couldn't flunk them. And I said, you have to have your lesson or I will flunk you. So the first 6 weeks, they found out that this teacher meant what she said. That if they didn't get their lesson, they got flunked whether they were the athletes or not. So they kind of changed their minds. Some of them dropped out if they could. The rest of them finished the course. Several years later, some of these tall, athletic men they were by this time because they had been in the war. One of them came in and he said, Mrs. Murphy, you didn't know that I would come back as a policeman in Kansas City. I've been through the war and I have been a policeman.
Was this the Korean War or the Vietnam?
No, not the Vietnam. That's
Korean War?
Yes.
So then...
by that time, maybe you were over in Korea.
No, I came back in 47, so that... that was... the Korean War ran from 1950 to 53 or 53, I guess. I'm not sure now. But okay. What did you like the most about teaching? And what did you like the least about teaching?
Well, I liked most, I guess, the association of most of my classes were girls. And I liked the association with the girls and thinking that maybe I was training them to be good mothers, because we did take up subjects sometimes if they would ask me about marriage. And at that time, believe it or not, there were quite a few girls that were having babies when they were sophomores in high school.
Yeah.
So I tried to influence them in that way. I liked the association with the students, hopefully helping them to mature. And of course I liked the salary.
What would you like the least about teaching?
Probably the discipline that had to be done. I mean, you had to have discipline in your classes, and sometimes it got pretty rough.
Is that right? Is that because you weren't tough enough on these kids?
No, I always had discipline.
You still had corporal punishment in those days, didn't you?
Oh, no.
No, you couldn't do corporal punishment?
No. I didn't go down with a ruler and whip.
Because I remember in grade school, I had corporal punishment.
Well, you were farther along in grade school when I was teaching.
Well, I understand that. That was an earlier period, but certainly corporal punishment. Plus the fact, you remember how you used to punish me?
Little switch.
That's right. And
what And there's no harm in that little switch on your legs.
And tell us how that little switch was obtained.
By you going and getting the little switch off the bars.
That was the
Cruelest thing, huh?
cruelest thing. Yes, God.
Make you furnish the little switch that they gave you a little switch, but it was always on your legs.